Utilitarianism represents a moral and ethical framework that serves as the basis for evaluating actions. It assesses actions by their ability to enhance happiness and reduce suffering. According to this theory, actions are considered morally right when they contribute to overall happiness and wrong when they result in suffering. In utilitarianism, utility encompasses not just practicality but also the pursuit of pleasure and avoidance of pain. Contrary to common misunderstandings, utilitarianism does not oppose pleasure. Instead, it embraces it as an integral aspect of ethical deliberation. This ethical perspective, advocated by philosophers from Epicurus to Bentham, takes a comprehensive approach to well-being. It emphasizes that utility includes various forms of pleasure, such as aesthetic, ornamental, and recreational pleasures, alongside the utilitarian pursuit of the greater good for greater number. However, utilitarianism faces criticism from those who view pleasure as the sole objective, leading to unflattering comparisons with pigs, highlighting the contentious nature of ethical theory.
Utilitarianism, higher and lower pleasures. Mill argues that there are qualitative differences between pleasures, with some being higher and others being lower. It emphasizes that not all pleasures are created equal. Some pleasures are more fulfilling and satisfying than others, and these differences are not just quantitative but qualitative. For instance, the pleasure derived from reading a great work of literature is qualitatively different from the pleasure of eating a delicious meal. Higher pleasures are those that engage our higher faculties and intellectual capacities, such as the enjoyment of art, literature, and philosophical pursuits. It highlights that higher pleasure are those that engage our intellectual and emotional faculties, providing a deeper sense of fulfillment and satisfaction. Lower pleasures, on the other hand, are more immediate and sensory in nature, such as physical pleasures or indulgence in basic desires. It means that lower pleasures provide a more superficial sense of fulfillment and satisfaction. One example of these is eating a delicious meal. With this explanation of higher and lower pleasures, we can say that higher pleasures are superior to lower pleasures, as they provide a deeper and more lasting sense of happiness and fulfillment, and accepts the thesis of Mill as he rejects the notion that all pleasures are equal and argues that the quality of pleasure should be considered when making a moral judgments and decisions. In conclusion, Mill's concept of higher and lower pleasures highlights the importance of engaging our higher faculties and intellectual capacities to achieve a deeper and more lasting sense of fulfillment and satisfaction. Utilitarianism, happiness is an aim. The ultimate end for which all other things are desirable is an existence as free as possible from pain and as rich as possible in enjoyment. One may say that seeking to achieve a fulfilling career, engaging in meaningful relationships, or contribute to the well-being of others is one of the examples of this. The goal of moral reasoning is to promote the greatest amount of happiness and minimize the suffering, which is the fundamental principle of utilitarianism. For example, a person may choose to donate to a charity or volunteer their time to help others. Next, happiness should be understood in terms of both quantity and quality, meaning that the amount of happiness and the quality of happiness are both important factors to consider. The preferences of those who are best equipped to make the comparison serve as the rule for measuring quality against quantity. This means that the opinions of those who have a greater range of experience and self-awareness should be given more weight. The general cultivation of nobleness of character is necessary to achieve the end of utilitarianism. This means that the pursuit of happiness is not just about individual pleasure, but also promoting the general welfare of society. Lastly, the ultimate aim of utilitarianism is to promote the general welfare and maximize happiness for the greatest number of people. Meaning that the goal of utilitarianism is not about just individual pleasure, but also promoting the happiness of society as a whole. In conclusion, the concept of happiness is an aim of utilitarianism highlights the importance of promoting the general welfare and maximizing happiness for the greatest number of people. This requires not just the pursuit of individual pleasure, but also the prevention of unhappiness and the cultivation of nobleness of character. Utilitarianism, self-sacrifice. Only in an imperfect world can anyone's best chance of serving the happiness of others be through the absolute sacrifice of their own happiness. This emphasizes that in an imperfect society, it may be necessary for someone to sacrifice their own happiness to serve the happiness of others. This lead us to the next point, that the readiness to make such a sacrifice is the highest virtue that can be found in man. For instance, a person may choose to donate their time, money, or resources to help others, even if it means sacrificing their own happiness. Third, someone who renounces the happiness for themselves but does not contribute to increasing the amount of happiness in the world does not deserve admiration. This means that self-sacrifice is only admirable if it contributes to the greater good. Fourth, the ascetic living on top of his pillar may be a rousing proof of what man can do, but surely not an example of what they should do. This means that the self-sacrifice should not be taken to the extreme of asceticism. For instance, a person who renounces all worldly pleasures and lives in isolation may not be considered virtuous if their actions do not contribute to the greater good. Fifth, while self-sacrifice is a noble virtue, it should be practiced when it contributes to the greater good and happiness of others, meaning that self-sacrifice should not be practiced for its own sake, but rather as a means to promote happiness of others. For instance, a person may choose to sacrifice their own happiness to take care of for a sick family member or to volunteer in a disaster-stricken area. This self-sacrifice contributes to the greater good and happiness of others. In conclusion, the concept of self-sacrifice in utilitarianism emphasizes the importance of promoting the greater good and happiness of others. While self-sacrifice is a noble virtue, it should be only practiced when it contributes to the greater good and happiness of others. This means that self-sacrifice should not be taken to the extreme of asceticism, but rather as a means to promote the happiness of others. Utilitarianism setting the standard too high. Objectors to utilitarianism sometimes find fault with its standards as being too high for humanity. They argue that requiring people always to act from the motive of promoting the general interest of society is demanding too much. However, this is a mistake in understanding the meaning of standard of morals and confusing the rule of action with the motive for acting. Ethics tells us what our duties are or by what test we can know them, but no system of ethics requires that our only motive in everything we do shall be a feeling of duty. 9900 of all our actions are done from other motives, and rightly so, because the ultimate aim of utilitarianism is to promote the general welfare and maximize happiness for the greatest number of people. While the standard of utilitarianism may be high, it is necessary to strive towards it in order to achieve the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Utilitarianism chilly. Some people criticize utilitarianism for making people cold and unsympathetic. They argue that it makes people focus only on the dry and hard consideration of the consequences of actions, leaving out the personal qualities from which those actions emanate, making them think that utilitarianism prioritizes rationality and logic over emotions and empathy. However, this is a misunderstanding of the purpose of a standard of morality and the meanings of the words right and wrong. Utilitarianism does not make people cold or unsympathetic, but rather provides a framework for making moral judgments based on the consequences of actions. It does not require people to ignore personal qualities, but rather to consider them in the context of the overall consequences of actions. In conclusion, the concept of utilitarianism and coldness highlights the importance of considering the emotional impact of actions on others. While some people may criticize utilitarianism for making people cold and unsympathetic, it actually provides a framework for making moral judgments based on the consequences of actions. By striving for the greatest good for the greater number of people, utilitarianism encourages people to act in a way that benefits society as a whole.
Utilitarianism as godless. In this section, Mill addresses the criticisms that utilitarianism is a godless or atheistic ethical theory. Critics argue that utilitarianism, by focusing solely on maximizing happiness and minimizing suffering in this world, neglects religious and spiritual considerations. Mill clarifies that utilitarianism does not inherently conflict with religious beliefs. Instead, it provides a secular framework for ethics that can coexist with various religious and non-religious worldviews. Utilitarianism, in his view, is a practical and a rational system of ethics that can guide moral decision-making without relying on divine commandments and supernatural beliefs. Mill argues that while utilitarianism does not require religious adherence, it is compatible with religious principles when they align with the promotion of general human well-being. Expediency. In this part of the chapter, Mill discusses the concept of expediency, which involves pursuing actions based on what is advantageous or convenient. Critics have argued that utilitarianism promotes expedient behavior at the expense of ethical integrity. Mill counters this criticism by emphasizing that true utilitarianism considers the long-term consequences and the well-being of all individuals. While utilitarianism may advocate for actions that appear expedient in the short term, it does so only if those actions ultimately lead to the greatest overall happiness. In essence, utilitarianism encourages individuals to weigh the benefits and drawbacks of various courses of action with the aim of achieving the best long-term outcomes for everyone involved. It is not a simple endorsement of immediate self-interest and convenience. Time to calculate. Mill addresses the concern that utilitarianism demands individuals to engage in extensive calculations before making moral decisions. Critics argue that such calculations can be impractical and cumbersome in real-life situations. Mill clarifies that in practice, people often make intuitive moral judgment based on their moral education and upbringing, and these judgments are frequently aligned with a utilitarian principle. While utilitarianism provides a rational framework for ethical decision-making, it acknowledges that individuals may not always have the luxury of carefully calculating consequences of every action. Instead, it suggests that individuals can rely on their moral intuition, which has been shaped by societal values and principles consistent with utilitarianism, to make reasonably sound moral judgments. Bad faith. In this chapter, Mill discusses the issue of bad faith or insincere adherence to utilitarianism. He acknowledges that some individuals may misuse or misinterpret utilitarianism to justify selfish or honest behavior. However, Mill argues that such misuse of the theory does not negate its moral validity. Instead, it underscores the importance of proper moral education and ethical consistency. Mill believes that a true utilitarian should act sincerely and consistently in accordance with the principle of maximizing overall happiness rather than selectively invoking utilitarianism to justify actions that go against its principles. He encourages individuals to practice genuine moral reasoning and ethical behavior rather than using utilitarianism as a rationalization for self-serving actions.